QUORUM Radio, baby.
You're listening to QUORUM Radio on WRMI 5850 kHz.
And QUORUM Radio. Now here with Brian Goodyear. Brian, he's tuning into QUORUM Radio as a guest from Birmingham, Alabama, the Yellowhammer State. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Anyway, so Brian, I like to have different people on the Facebook sites that deal with JFK research, and your background is one that's interesting. You got interested in the JFK assassination by way of your interest in the Bay of Pigs. Tell us about your take on it. Give us your own optic, if you will, on how this assassination took place, who the people were that were behind it, whether it was Lee Harvey Oswald, whether it was a conspiracy, whether it was the CIA, LBJ, Jackie Kennedy, the driver, badge man.
Well, I am looking for the truth. I probably am biased, although I have changed directions numerous times throughout the 30 years that I've looked at this case. The first book that I read was Contract on America. And back then I thought the mafia may have been the center of it. But as I read more and more CIA files and started studying about the Bay of Pigs and started seeing this bitterness and animosity from especially some of these exiles down in Miami with J.M. Wave that had the ability to be very violent and militant, very bitter about betrayal at the Bay of Pigs. I started thinking, nobody had more of a motive to pull the trigger than they did. Now, Did they plan it? That's where it gets more complicated to me. But as far as just doing the deed, I have settled on Cuban exiles doing it. And of course, you got John Martino, Homer Echeverria, Chichi Quintero, Herminio Diaz, Alado del Valle, who died the same day as David Ferry, a cascade of names. When you look at the JFK records release, it's unbelievable the number of, it's just full of stories about Cuban exiles. And so it's to me, that it looks like preponderance of the evidence,
Sure.
The majority,
right.
I think probably 50 or 60% of the JFK files talk about Cuban exiles.
I didn't know that. That's amazing. What do you think about Lee Harvey Oswald? Was he just the patsy, a good American who was just trying to mind his own business, wanted to see JFK like everybody else, happened to be on the 6th floor, and he wasn't shooting squirrels that day, was he?
I'm confused. I don't know who Lee Harvey Oswald was. Was he a patsy? Was he an informant? Was he working for an intelligence agency? That's really, really hard to put a finger on. Do I think, and also these agencies can be competing and they may not even like each other. If you talk to people like Tosh Plumlee and people like that. And so who was Oswald? I think ultimately, I believe the patsy. And I think when he said he was a patsy, that automatically implies that he had help of some kind. Did he pull a trigger or not pull a trigger? I won't commit to that. I personally believe that he was on the 6th floor, and I believe that he pulled that trigger. I don't know if it was because he was tricked into being up there, if he was part of something bigger. I don't know.
Right. So then his very strange trip to Mexico City.
Yes.
In late September, early October of 1963. What do you make of that?
So first of all, let's go to New Orleans just before that. Bolton Ford, back before he came back from Russia, right? Do you know about Bolton Ford?
No, tell me about Bolton Ford.
So two men went to Bolton Ford in New Orleans to buy Econoline vans for the Cuban cause. one dark complected man and one lighter complexion man. And they used the name Lee Oswald as the name of when the salesman who also went and talked to his manager, both remember the story. I think more than one person there remembers that story.
Wow.
But they were there to buy, they left that name as the contact name for buying those vans. And so the first time Oswald was impersonated, in my opinion, was at Bolton Ford in New Orleans. And that document's available if you just look that up. Mexico City gets more confusing. I believe that Oswald was in Mexico City. I'm one of the few conspiracy theorists that I think believe that. So I put myself in a place on the website's obviously been battered from both sides. But
Oh my gosh, how ridiculous! I mean, this thing, it only happened 57 years ago. Gosh.
Well, people get emotional about it, and that's okay.
Yeah, they do. I just think it's a little bit much. I mean, come on. I was 5 years old when it happened. And I just remember talk about Jack Ruby getting involved with, killing Oswald, and, the seeing John salute his father, and, Jackie Kennedy with her veil, and going slowly up and down the steps of I guess it was the rotunda, and maybe the cathedral. So to me, I just don't understand why there's so much hostility. To me, it's just overblown, totally overblown.
It's about finding the truth, right? It's about finding the truth. We want to know the truth.
Sure, but I mean, the things that you'll see on these sites. Somebody said to me, Billy, you're CIA. I said, that's funny. I could use the money, man.
So the alias at I meant to go back. Let me go back to Bolton Ford. The alias of one of the guys there at Bolton Ford, the dark-skinned guy that was there. I can't remember the alias he used, but it's the alias of a guy named Jose Moron, Morejon. So look him up too. He has interested. He was a special forces guy in Vietnam, trained at Columbus, School of the Americas, which you probably know about. And so
I've heard of,
Mexico City, I believe Oswald was at that embassy. That was one of the most heavily surveilled places on the planet at that time. And the CIA had a massive surveillance program. So to say, the Pulse camera was broken that day, and that they could have just sent that camera out anywhere to get it fixed in a day's notice.
Oh, come on, man. Let me tell you, I'll tell you what I think is. That was a massive case of CYA. Cover your backside, cover your ass. I mean,
It's confusing. I think the imposter was there. I think that his voice was on tape calling himself Oswald. But, Oswald visited the Soviet embassy. And he talked to a guy he talked to Kostakov and Nechiporenko, who was KGB intelligence. And both of those guys, they're not wrong. They know who they had in front of them. Nechiporenko apparently dealt with Oswald in Russia. They knew that was Lee Harvey Oswald that put that gun on the table. And when he couldn't get the visa to Cuba that day, he stood up and said, "I'm going to kill Kennedy for this." Now, was that a dog and pony show? Is that part of building Oswald, part of building his character? I don't know, but I believe that happened.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, there's an angle to this that is quite interesting, and that is that the story. I love the story that Brian Littell has told in Castro Secrets, in which he says that Oswald claimed he was being harassed by the FBI, and he pulled out the pistol. "This is what I have to carry around, and I need you to get me out of here. I need you to let me into Cuba." And they said no, and said, "This is going to end badly," And he said, "No, I have no choice. Now I have to kill Kennedy." Now, what Littell suggests is that maybe the Cubans, more being risk takers than the Soviets, were willing to take a risk with Oswald and to push him over the edge psychologically so he could prove his revolutionary street cred. And so supposedly what he said, he claimed that, I thought, from what I based what I heard was supposedly in front of the Cubans, and Castro claimed he knew nothing about Oswald. Well, there was an FBI double agent named Jack Childs, who was considered a very safe, reliable agent by the Cubans and by the Russians. His family was from Russia. He was with the Communist Party USA. He went to see Castro, and Castro said that, yeah, he basically said he was going to kill JFK. And then you have the interesting case of Win Scott, who was from, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was from Alabama. Another distinguished Alabamian.
He came back to Alabama, the University of Alabama.
Yeah, and he and Thomas Mann, who was the ambassador, they were convinced that they were shut down. They were investigating. They were starting to get warm or hot, and the people in Washington, D.C. shut down their investigation. That was it. And one of the diplomats involved with it actually committed suicide. I'm reading about it now, and very fish. What's that? No, Thomas didn't know. It was somebody whose name is, I'll tell you right now, because I bought the book and I'm reading it now, and it's really, really good. I'll tell you exactly who it was. You see,
that's what happened to Thomas from the Thomas memo as well.
Well, there was Thomas Mann. I think it might have been Thomas. You may be right. And it was Cruel and Shocking Act by Phil Sheenan. He talks about this. And let me see here. Let me go to suicide. Charles William Thomas.
He was at the twist party with Elena Garro. Eli Kuki, June Cobb may have been there as well.
Well, yeah. Actually,
Francisco Garro did an interview just recently that corroborated this, that he did it on, of course, a lot of people bash Bob Baer's investigation. I think he went the wrong direction with his conclusions, but those interviews were very interesting on his show. And Francisco Garro corroborated that story.
Well, what happened was, it wasn't that Thomas was at the party. But it was Elena Garro claimed to be at the party. And Elena Garro was Octavio Paz's wife, I believe. And she knew of Silvia Tirado de Duran, oftentimes called Silvia Duran. Supposedly she was sleeping with Oswald. That brief time in Mexico. And that supposedly he was at the party. And then Elena Garro saw him after the party on the street, supposedly. And then, what happens? JFK gets shot. Oswald gets apprehended in the theater. He's on national TV. Quickly, that's carried in Mexico. They see it. And she goes, "That guy, I saw him at the party." They were, dancing to Chubby Checker. Supposedly, that song was a rage in Mexico as it wasn't in America.
That's the twist.
Anyway, the twist. Do the twist. Yeah. So, right. So there you go, man. So you think that the Cubans did it? What?
So Elena Garro was friends with June Cobb. They were friends.
Right. Oh, were they friends? Was June Cobb and Elena Garro friends? Yeah,
but they had a disagreement, and I think she booted her. But you can look that up. I believe that's.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, well, get this, Brian. My son recently got married. I live in Peru, and he recently got married in Los Angeles or nearby. And so I flew to through Mexico, and on the way back, I wanted to go to Hotel del Comercio and take a picture, and interview the people there and all that. People spend big money to stay in Lee Harvey Oswald's hotel room.
In the bad part of town.
Yes, supposedly, I mean, it's, they say it's not that such a bad part of town, but that little nook of that neighborhood is not really that clean. One of those types of things. I wanted to go, then I had just purchased a new laptop. I said, maybe it's not such a good idea. I may get robbed, Well, that's great. So then, what about go ahead.
I also think Silvia Duran and Askew,
Yeah,
as well as
Asquith.
Robert Tabor and Gibson of the FPCC? Because that's all tied into that story, right? I think they were
Well,
I think they were
be.
CIA assets.
Well, it could be, could have been, but you know something though? I mean, if Oswald had been a CIA asset, they left him high and they left him stringing along. He was just he would have been too, able.
Well, I don't think Oswald was. I think Askew, Duran, Tabor.
I think they were CIA assets?
I think they were.
Really?
Yeah, I think CIA documents show that.
Well, they had a lot of, let me tell you,
CIA.
Castro, let me tell you, the story about Florentino Aspiaga is incredible. This is in the book. He was a very high-level Cuban intelligence asset that defected. But before he did, when he was just a kid, like 18 years old, Castro had these kids who were barely even shaving, practically diplomats and working in intel. And Florentino was a reliable kid. His father was a member of the Cuban Communist Party. And when he was like 18, he was doing electronic espionage, surveillance of these CIA teams that were entering Cuba. And he got a message to go to a special, radio hut about 200 yards distance on the morning of November 22nd, 1963. He was told to go to a secure area. So he goes over there. He calls and he said, "What's going on?" He said, "You're not to follow any CIA penetration teams right now. Stop it. Immediately stop. Focus on Texas. Focus on Texas." So this was on the morning of the day that JFK got shot, and they told him to start taking signals from Texas. So he started doing that, and that was strange. Why?
Bob Baer interviews him on JFK Declassified.
Oh, he did?
Yes.
Really? Now, may rest in peace, Florentino passed away. So anyway, well, listen, Brian Goodyear, thanks so much for being on QUORUM Radio. I got to have you on again to talk about your thoughts regarding JFK Jr. and his death at the controls of his Piper Navajo, I think, that happened on his way to Martha's Vineyard tragically in I think it was in 1999, right? So,
yes.
Yes, we'll have you on again.
Piper, a single engine Piper. I don't remember what kind it was.
Right. And I think it happened just after dusk. It began to get dark. He was not familiar with night control, night flying. And just for those of you who don't know, Brian Goodyear is a Gulfstream pilot. So he's a man who has a lot to say. Got to talk to him also about David Ferrie. Supposedly, I would hope you know about David Ferrie and his escapades, right?
Well, I grew up in New Orleans, and I have a good story to tell you about New Orleans. My college.
My dad's from. Yeah. My dad was from New Orleans.
Ronnie son.
Wow, we got to talk again, man. My dad was from the Crescent City. May rest in peace. I still have relatives there, distant relatives in the Big Easy. And we got to have you on again, Brian Goodyear, to talk flying, JFK, and the Kennedy assassination. All right?
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Brian, for being on QUORUM Radio. Much obliged.